All right, welcome to the release rundown this week with Crockett Jones. We just dropped these beauties, the oak wax Shannon and the bronze oiled sides Grisdale, the all-season trekkers as we called them. But for this rundown, as is the point of this series, we're going to take a little bit of a different look, different angle, deeper dive on things that you just may not know about either the release or the entire brand or theme of said release. So here we go. So the subtitle of this series could be called The Things You May Not Know About Crockett Jones. And one of those is, in terms of our works with C&J, is really that this is 7 years in the making. So they don't really do collaborations, especially at the level of an expansiveness of what we kind of want to do. And however, through maybe much annoyance and as they experimented with more casual styles in their seasonal and limited releases, I think we found like really great alignment and finally started to working together. But this is really like 7 years of us wanting Crockett Jones in our roster and to be doing collabs with them. So we're hyper excited, as is our audience, to just see, a slightly different lens, the Division Road perspective on C&J. Well, the first thing we want to touch upon is leather selection. So Crockett Jones, unlike some of the other brands we work with, don't have a ton of leathers and are very picky about the leathers that they work with. In fact, every stock leather, or we'll say the majority of stock leathers that they have, are exclusively developed for them. So the leathers that you're seeing throughout their stock models and then through our collaborations are often like specific recipes and hides for Crockett Jones. Jonathan Jones and Crockett Jones is pretty much run by the Jones family now. He is definitely what we would call a leather elitist, which we regard in a very high way. We love leather elitists. We're leather elitists. So he goes to even raw sources and hand selects hides. And then he's also specifically developing these recipes with tanneries like Horween and CF Stead, but also like a lot of small batch European tanneries that can handle his specific requests. Also means that every leather serves a purpose. And so they don't want to work with a ton of stuff. They want to work with a very select amount of leathers that they can allocate on specific styles. This is about our down select on their leather offerings that work for kind of the stuff that we're developing with them. So it's not a huge amount of offerings. Most everything is calf or steer. This stuff is rare to begin with because no one else has these leathers. So, and there's a lot that they do with their leather development that others do not. And a perfect example of this is kind of their signature Scotch Grain. Most of you guys know this leather. Scotch Grains are typically hyper rigid, almost towards unwearable. It is always a pretty heavy corrected leather and obviously printed. And so what is often done with Scotch Grains is the worst hide selection is done. So you select kind of the worst articles because they're getting corrected anyways. And Crockett Jones does the exact opposite with their Scotch Grain, and there are reasons for that. So they hand select calf hides. Now, going into calf hides, a lot of things are called calf. They are not calf. They are generally split steer. Actual calf hides are pretty rare. They're also quite expensive. So they're using actual hand-selected calf hides for leather that's getting corrected because you have to correct it in order to print it, and you kind of want to create some of this burnishing effect between the highs and the lows of the printing, which happens through the dyeing and correction process. But there's a reason that they're going after these hides, which is wearability, flexibility, patina. Often with English country footwear, you will see it used in particular portions of the pattern, either the vamp or the cap toe, maybe the backstay, and that's just because it's hyper rigid. Crockett Jones wants to use this Scotch Grain really for the entire pattern, really exemplified in their iconic Coniston boot. In a normal, if this was somebody else's Scotch Grain, this quarter would be just completely flexible. But what the calf hide, and especially the high quality ones, allows is a lot of flexibility on foot, and this to kind of be wearable, really quite wearable out of the box. It also allows for it to patina beautifully. And a Scotch Grain of this quality, through our own experience, as it patinas, it becomes amazingly beautiful. Still has that kind of dress country aesthetic to it, but you get a lot of highs and lows. The burnishing comes throughout the creasing and breaks in the boot. So that's a good example of why Crockett Jones is developing really specific tannages for their footwear. And another interesting fact about this Scotch Grain is this is actually their proprietary print. So it comes from the 1920s. They've been using it since then, but you will not find another Scotch Grain print like this. And it's got this like river stone pebbled quality to it. And it's just a beautiful leather. So this is a perfect example of why they don't have a ton of leathers. They're just developing the best that they can for their footwear. What makes Crockett Jones really quite different than many other makers in our niche and at different levels of footwear is their pattern matching. And this is really well exemplified through our Shannon collaboration with them. So the Shannon is normally done on the 375 last, which is got a little bit more profile. We'd kind of call it a moderate profile, kind of a moderate waist, moderate heel. So just a roomy boot, given the open collar derby boot pattern that the Shannon is, we wanted to put it on the 378. And so our Shannons are the only ones on the 378 last, which is really like a dress Munson if we were describing it within our own vernacular. So, you know, slightly elongated toe, really nice shape, but roomy in the forefoot, pretty snug waist and heel. So it's kind of a dress form that rather than up front is designed to grip you in the back. And so when a particular pattern is allocated to a different last, most makers just take the last and throw the pattern on it and call it good. Crockett Jones, not a chance. So each pattern is really almost developed for a specific last. When those get changed, Crockett Jones either adapts the pattern heavily or completely redoes it based off of the form that it's going on. So when doing this Shannon, for example, they adjusted everything from the quarter to the vamp alignment, so brought it up a little bit to match the instep of the 378. They adjusted the apron entirely to match the toe and forefoot shape, essentially for the vamp of the 378, and then also kind of change this curve from the quarter to the vamp pattern piece so that it really kind of aligned with the waist of the boot as well. Now, you could say, what's the importance of that? Well, I think a lot of our customers have the experience of, you know, either getting a different leather in the same pattern and the same last in the same size and it not fitting very accurately to them, or getting the same last in a different pattern, i.e. style, and also not fitting well. This pattern adjustment to last allows the last to kind of speak the truth, so to speak, in terms of sizing and how it'll fit. So if you're familiar with the 378 from, say, our Ross or another boot that we do in that last, and want to get the Shannon, your size and the fit is going to be pretty precise. And so your experience isn't thrown by a different leather or a different pattern. You can just kind of size accurately as long as you're properly sized to begin with, which if you're not, call us, email us. So that's a huge thing. The other thing is the purpose of a last and lasting is to stretch the hide in the directions it kind of wants to go around a specific form. And that forms not only like how something looks out of the box, but how it's meant to conform to the foot. So when you make these adjustments, you're kind of forcing the leather to go in the directions you desire it to for lasting, and then also conform that way and in the right directions in breaking. So what that means is a Crockett Jones opens up alarmingly quick, and it opens up to the foot. So rather than breaking away from the foot or having a lot of odd breaks like in the vamp and in the quarter and things like that, by adjusting the pattern to the last that are also like very precisely designed and developed, you're maintaining the true form of the boot through the long term while it's conforming in the right way to your foot. So frankly, in short, it makes the break-in quick. It makes the boot perform really well in terms of how it molds to the foot over the short and long term, and just frankly like a joy to wear. And you're not going to make a whole lot of like sizing determinations based off of, oh, this was a suede and this is, you know, a big thick leather, or it's a different pattern and it fits differently. Quite frankly, with Crockett Jones, you can pretty much like, once you figure out your size, especially in a certain last, you're good to go with anything using that last in that size. So for that reason, you know, we love this stuff, and it's really quite different because frankly, until you get into a whole nother price category, no one really makes those adjustments based off of the last to pattern matching. So yeah, great reason. On to the Grisdale. So Crockett Jones is obviously associated with a little bit more dressier footwear. I mean, the Coniston kind of like was a signature country gentleman boot, but they've done outdoor footwear for years, and this is really a great example of the direction that they're kind of going, or do have portions of their line going towards. The original pattern of this was called the Radnor, and it was debuted in Spectre, James Bond flick, as a outdoor kind of military hunting boot, which is really the DNA of this style. But the reason we wanted to speak into this is just that they do super outdoor styles, including velt construction on like the Snowden. But for example, the Grisdale and how it differs from its original iterations is this is actually almost a completely waterproof boot, especially if like standing in a heavy puddle or even a flowing stream for a brief period of time. Long-term submersion in water will not be waterproof, but anytime you see this single continuous vamp, you know, it really is an outdoor style to keep the quarter protected from water and essentially one barrier between the foot and the outdoors. And what they did with this style was actually adapt it quite a bit to have a waterproof membrane as the interlining in the vamp. So throughout this entire portion, you've got a waterproof layer between the lining and the upper. And then they went with an unlined quarter on this guy to increase flexibility. Also, something that we wanted to speak into on this guy is the bronze oiled side leather, which was specifically ordered for Division Road. Pulled it out of their archives, really had all the qualities that we kind of love in a leather. Robust, high character, will patina amazingly well. It's kind of like a chamois, heavily oiled, nubucked surface to allow those oils to come to the surface for protection and for patina. In this light khaki color, this thing's going to get amazing for almost like a work boot, elegant work boot leather in terms of the tannage. So this is a style that, you know, you would see kind of the inspiration in a lot of the other makers that we work with, but really coming through in the elegance and refined craftsmanship and design and development of Crockett Jones. Still super refined in the construction, but just a proper outdoor boot with that waterproofness in not only the hide, the membrane, storm welt, and then a good old lug sole. So this is a great example of, you know, Crockett Jones has been doing outdoor styles like the Coniston for a while, but how those things are evolving into like really stylish utilitarian pieces like this that we collaborated on and dropped. And then one of the big things that you want to know about Crockett Jones that we've kind of hinted into is just wearability. And, you know, the build of a Crockett Jones is somewhere between, say, an Alden, which the English would call more of like a town shoe. You know, great product, but just lighter in terms of the insole weights, midsole weights. Alden uses reverse welting commonly, which just makes it like a little bit lighter on foot, but not really designed for the outdoors. And something maybe like a Viberg, which is, you know, a fully industrial work boot build that they've obviously like refined over the years in terms of craftsmanship and making it a little bit more contemporary aesthetically. Crockett Jones is somewhere in between. We actually don't know how to define it for that reason, because it is fully rebuildable. So when Crockett does a resole, they will replace everything from the constructed insole down, i.e. the welt, midsole, and sole. But it's got the lightness of essentially a resolable piece of footwear, meaning like a little bit of a lighter build. And they've just precisely adjusted weights from insole to midsole. And then also, you know, they're much like Alden and Trickers. Sometimes they're using full weight hides. Sometimes they're, you know, it's top grain, but it's, you know, a good 1.8 to sometimes 2 millimeters of top grain, depending on the tannage, whether it's a calf or a steer, etc. But, you know, they're adjusting for wearability. We also spoke into the pattern matching and leather development, and that also means that these break in amazingly well and quickly. And so, you know, the short of it is they're a joy to wear. They're not a bear to break in. They'll be pretty light on foot to comparison, especially if you're comparing it to a fully industrial product, but more stable than some of the other makers out there. So that is a big piece. The other thing that we wanted to touch a point on is sizing. For all of those reasons, wearability, break-in, etc., how to size these guys. So we've been finding out ourselves and with our clients that often you're going to take a half size down from, say, your standard Viberg size or your standard Tricker size. If you're on the snug side of those makers, you can stick with the same size. But if there's any room, you know, depending on the last and all of that other stuff, if there's any room in your Viberg, your Trickers, you can go a half size down in these and be really snug out of the box, and they will open up quite quickly. The other thing is they are pretty much all standard E widths. Each last is a little bit different, but these will open up quite quickly to a double E. And you know, that's really exemplified on this pair. So this is really a double E foot, sized, same size as a snug Viberg, and dress form, looks really sleek, double E foot, opened up quite quick, and this is in a very sturdy steer hide, the Hurricane hide, which is kind of a combination tannage and pretty robust leather. And so you can see still maintaining the form, really nice break, but you know, this is a double E foot, and then you know, down to C and certainly D, you're going to be quite comfortable in their lasts as well. So really, they only do one width because for all the reasons listed, they only really need to. But if you are kind of on the cusp with sizing, go to the smaller of your size with Crockett Jones, or the smallest possible that you think, and you may feel them snug out of the box. Like I said, in a week, they'll be well fit for the long term and open up quite quickly and nicely for you. And yeah, those are the big pieces about Crockett Jones with this week's rundown. And we're excited for guys to get these on their feet. So email us, call us if you got any sizing questions, anything at all. And we're happy and pleased and in love with this product, and know you will be too.